Troy produced one of the more surprising seasons in college football last year. A 12-2 season under John Summerall was not expected, but in a way it should have been with the talent returning. This year they lose quite a bit of that talent, but they also return a defense that should be elite once again. We're taking a look at the top 10 players that are going to make life easy for this team in the Sun Belt. Everything starts with the defense, and TJ Jackson is back after a 14.5 tackle for loss, 8 sack season. He was a force for this team, and this was a talented team with a deep group of playmakers, and Jackson was able to stand out. A first team all Sun Belt selection. He was one of those players that was able to stand out thanks largely to a good unit overall. But it's hard to stand out when you're in a talented group, and the great players often do that. Now, there were times where he was hurt and still managed to make plays. We saw a number of plays that he made last year while injured. And now he comes back to lead what should be another talented defense for the Trojans this year. On the offensive side of the ball, there are some talented players and explosive weapons that will feature today. KIMANI VIDAL is one of those guys. Second team all Sun Belt selection, over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground. Kind of surprised a lot of people. And they needed him to be a surprising player, an explosive player, because the passing attack was very up and down, losing some key pieces on the offensive line and at wide receivers. So he's going to need to do that again this year. Maybe not to the extent that he did last year, but a lot of that hinges on Gunnar Watson, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Two underrated players on the edge. First one, Richard JIBUNOR, second team all Sun Belt, 11.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, an athletic playmaker that could potentially move around the defensive line at linebacker. This is a group that was extremely athletic, swarmed to the football, and that gives you some versatility and some depth at different positions to be able to move guys around and insert pieces that maybe fit better at one position, whereas guys like JIBUNOR can move around and give you extra experience, maybe at places where you need it. This is a defense, again, should be one of the best defenses in college football, especially in the Sun Belt. And the athleticism that they display is a big reason why. Now, one of my favorite playmakers is Javon Solomon, third team all Sun Belt, and 7.5 tackles lost, 4.5 sacks. Not the production that you saw from these other players, but you see the athleticism. He is someone, again, another player that could move around. He could be on the edge. He can move to the second level, play linebacker, go out in space and cover. I really like what I've seen from him, and he is a multi-year starter who is going to start once again, and it gives this team a veteran player with versatile experience and versatile skill set that can give them the ability to move him around and make plays. That's the biggest thing with his defense is they are so athletic and they have so much energy. And we've already talked about three guys that are going to make life easy. Now losing Carlton Martial is going to hurt, but you're looking at a defense, the front seven especially, that should be just fine. An underrated player in the secondary, DELL PETTUS. Honorable mention, all Sun Belt, but he is someone who has all conference potential. You're looking at a very hard hitting safety that isn't afraid to throw his weight around. He is not afraid to make plays. He is not afraid to stuff a ball carrier, but he also can cover deep. Maybe didn't have the production, but you're looking at a guy who can make plays. He is a veteran player who, again, flew under the radar, but I think that he's going to do big things this year. Another player in that secondary is Reddy Stewart. First team all Sun Belt, maybe should be higher on this list. But I think that he is a great playmaker for this secondary that's going to feature a couple new faces. And Reddy Stewart's probably not going to see the production that he had last year, 12 passes defended, 3 interceptions, but that gives him an opportunity to get the other guys up to speed. Now, when you have as good of a team and good of a unit as this defense was last year, you're ultimately going to lose some players at some point, and those players that do return, like Reddy Stewart, are going to need to be able to get that other corner up to speed. They're going to see probably less attention because teams know what he can do, but how well he teaches his other guy is going to be huge in determining their success this year. Simply put, the offense hinges on Gunnar Watson. 14 touchdowns and 12 interceptions simply isn't going to cut it. You just cannot have that much of a small gap between your touchdown interception ratio. You have to take care of the football more. You have to be able to get the ball to your playmakers. Now, losing Tez Johnson obviously is going to hurt, but there are a couple guys returning that can make life easy. Now, some of that is going to be on Watson too. You can't blame everything on the receivers. Sometimes your quarterback has to make a play. And if Watson does take that step forward, the defense doesn't have to do as much. KIMANI VIDAL doesn't have to do as much. And this offense becomes more well-rounded. One of those guys that could step up is DESHON STOUDEMIRE. 507 yards, 2 touchdowns, not the greatest production from the wide receivers, but I think that there is the potential for him to grow, to become a more go-to wide receiver, to become more involved in the passing attack, and if he does, I think that this offense becomes more balanced. Now, again, a lot of that hinges on Watson, but if he finds good chemistry with Stoudemire or maybe one of these other receivers, then I really like where this offense goes. I think a big addition to the transfer portal is Asa Martin from Memphis. Now, didn't have the greatest production last year, 435 yards on the ground with 7 touchdowns, pretty decent. But you also have to look at 312 yards and 1 touchdown as a pass catcher. I think that you're going to see Troy use some 2 running back sets and maybe not necessarily both of them in the backfield. I think that Asa Martin is able to go out and be more of a factor in the passing attack and be able to make plays. You saw what he did at Memphis, and I think you're going to see the same at Troy. I think that they have the ability to use that flexibility, and you have depth at the position now where if KIMANI VIDAL needs a break, Asa Martin can step in and do just fine. Another player that could step up and play a big role, JABRE Barber at wide receiver. 25 catches last year, not the most productive player, but 351 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is again, Gunnar Watson needs guys to step up, and Barber could be one of those guys. Again, limited production, but you saw that he was efficient with his production. 14 yards per catch is pretty good. It's something that could help this offense. And again, the passing attack is really where it's going to come down to because if the passing attack takes a step forward, the offense as a whole takes a step forward. And that takes a lot of pressure off of a defense who does lose quite a bit of talent, quite a bit of experience. And Carlton Marshall has the most tackles in college football history. You don't just replace him overnight. This is still a defense that is extremely talented. They are still going to be one of the best in the Sun Belt. And if this offense can do more, that's going to help this defense feel less pressure and be able to make more plays because they're not having to do as much work.